Welcome, everyone, to our latest EdSource Roundtable. My name is Ann Vasquez, the CEO of EdSource. Last month's release of California's standardized test scores showed what most of us were expecting. Scores in math and English language arts dropped, wiping out years of modest but steady progress. After 2 school years disrupted by distance learning amid the pandemic, it's no surprise that students have some ground to make up. The big question is, how do we do that? Tutoring has emerged as a silver bullet of sorts, with a gold standard being the same tutor working individually or with small groups of students several times a week. What is working, and how can educators best use the unprecedented windfall in COVID relief dollars? Today, we'll hear from a number of experts in the field and in school districts, including a student who will share her own experience. EdSource would like to thank the Hewlett Foundation for making today's roundtable possible. Now, for our introductions. First, I'd like to welcome to our panel Susanna Loeb, education economist and the director of the Annenberg Institute at Brown University. Please also welcome Sal Khan, the CEO and founder of Khan Academy, as well as a number of other nonprofit education labs. Next, I'd like to introduce Lakeisha Young, co-founder and CEO of the Oakland Reach, a parent-run organization intended to empower parents. I'd also like to welcome Madison Lee. She's a senior at Portola High School in Irvine Unified School District, and she'll be sharing with us her experience with the district's tutoring program. I'd also like to welcome Shani Valencia, coordinator of educational technology for the Irvine Unified School District in Orange County. Finally, a warm welcome to Alice Prentice, an area superintendent at Green Dot Public Schools, California, where she has oversight of 5 middle and high schools in the South Los Angeles community. Thank you also to the team working behind the scenes today. There's quite a few of you who are helping to answer all of the questions behind the scenes. Our moderator today is EdSource Editor-at-Large, John Fensterwald. And John, please take it over. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you. I'm really excited about the next hour. I've been looking forward to this session on tutoring for quite a while. So, ask any parent what would best help their children accelerate learning and catch up from what they may have missed during the pandemic, and they will invariably say tutoring. Or put differently, they may say, wealthy parents hire tutorings and I want what they want for free. And they're right. As Susanna Loeb and Sal Khan will agree, extensive research has found that certain forms of tutoring are not only promising, but they work, showing positive impact across all grades and subjects. But in-person tutors are definitely hard to find in large numbers. Programs can be hard to implement. Just ask Los Angeles Unified, which has been slow to moving ahead with its very impressive and ambitious plan. And tutors require significant training. So for the next hour, we will explore tutoring in various modes and talk about promising and innovative efforts that may be able to help meet some of the demand for California. And at the end of the hour, maybe we can provide suggestions to the state of California, which created a new potentially significant tutoring effort called College Core. It's just getting off the ground. More on that later. But for now, let's start. We've got a great panel, so I'll turn to Susanna Loeb first and give us an overview of national studies and research you've done at Brown, and also with the National Student Support Accelerated that you founded. What is meant by high dosage tutoring and what makes it effective?
So thanks for having me here today. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Tutoring's unlike most educational approaches in that we have a lot of good research on its effectiveness. And we've examined almost 100 studies and looked for kind of commonalities across tutoring programs that are particularly effective. And these programs have several features in common, including significant time in tutoring. So at least 3 times a week over the course of a semester or a school year. And that's where the term high dosage tutoring comes from. But that isn't all that makes it effective. High impact programs really cultivate sustained and strong relationships between students and their tutors. They closely monitor student understanding and skills and use those data so that the tutor can actually meet the specific needs of each student. And they tend to use high quality materials and provide tutors with both some initial training and then ongoing coaching. In order for students to benefit, however, they actually have to go to the tutoring. So the evidence also shows that effective tutoring programs tend to be embedded in the school day because that way they can make sure that the students who need it receive it. People do define tutoring in many ways, and different types of tutoring meet the needs of different groups of students. The kind of tutoring that I'm talking about is intensive high impact tutoring, which really does show impressive results for students most behind. Opt-in homework help tutoring is another kind of tutoring, which has some benefits. We just completed a study of a popular opt-in tutoring program, and it found that it can be effective for the students who attend. But we also found that these students tend to be the more engaged, higher achieving students. Students who were behind in school were unlikely to opt in. And as a result, if your school or district chooses to participate in an opt-in homework help program, it's important to keep in mind that the program can be helpful to some students, but they're not the same as what we've been, it's not the same as what we've been calling high impact tutoring. And they're unlikely to have anywhere near the kinds of positive effects that we've been seeing, particularly for students who are somewhat disengaged in school. So essentially the opt-in programs alone will probably not be equity enhancing, but they can be beneficial. It's the high impact tutoring programs that are really dramatic in what we've seen in the research and their effects.
Great. So if it's hard to find tutors, which it is, and you may not have the funding for it, what's in between the 24/7 and the high impact? What alternatives are there? What are your trade-offs and priorities then, Susanna?
Well, I think it is actually doable to put these in, but it's really better to think about if it's not feasible to provide high impact tutoring for all students, are there students who could really benefit from this? And could you spread it so that students who can engage in tutoring outside of school, in before or after school, would really opt in, are able to do that, where you use the school time really to support the students who could most benefit from it. But I do actually think that in the long run, it's going to be possible to provide this kind of relationship-based, individualized instruction to all students. And I say that because there's some kinds of approaches in education that don't quite fit with how schools work, and you're like, oh, well, let's not use it. But this is the only way we know really to accelerate student learning. Like, we don't have another option here that really has been shown to work. And as a result, I think it's up to us to figure out how to get that into the schools. There's a lot of funding right now, but even before the ESSER funding was there, a number of districts were already using programs like Reading and Math Core or Saga Education to reach students during the school day in these kinds of intensive programs. So I do think that it's a hard time right now. In the labor market, it's just hard to recruit people, but many districts are doing really good things, partnering either with tutoring providers or I think sustainably partnering with local universities. I think you just implied something about that I don't know about, so I'm really interested in hearing. A number of the districts that we're working with are partnering with their local university, and what's nice about that is the university students come in and are the tutors, but it can also create a pathway into the program, into the district for teachers. It can diversify the educators who are in the school. I think there are a lot of options, and just because I know it's not that easy to do, but I really do think it's our only option for the long run, is to figure out how to get students the individualized attention that they need, not only because of their academics, but just for kind of social emotional benefits as well.
Well, we're going to be turning to a couple of the innovative programs that are actually beginning to fill some of that need in a minute. But let me turn to Sal Khan. Sal, we wouldn't have any problem with tutoring if you were everybody's uncle, but you're not, unfortunately. And so we have made progress you've made progress during the pandemic. I think your usage of Sal Khan Academy tripled. So what did you learn from that experience moving forward that districts and schools could apply post-pandemic for academic recovery, and talk about what you are doing both through Khan and through other partnerships you have?
Yeah, absolutely. And to be clear, Khan Academy got started with me remotely tutoring cousins My only nieces and nephews are actually cats. So, but just
Okay.
get that,
Thank you.
get that clear. I have kids, but my nieces. No, and I think it's an interesting question because there's a lot of cool things that Susanna just mentioned. One is the end goal is, I think there's a recognition that being able to meet the students where they are, personalize the students, address, the term unfinished learning is used very heavily, but that's really the other side of the coin of mastery learning, which is you always have the opportunity and incentive to fill in your gaps, address whatever you might have. There's that element of it. And then there's the other element, which is the human connection element of it. And they obviously both can happen through tutoring, but there might be ways that you can more narrowly hit one or the other. Now, a lot of folks here know Khan Academy. It really got started as, I always tell the team at Khan Academy, as we try to build the software and the content, is like, what would a good tutor do? What would a good tutor, when we're making the videos, when we're making the exercises, when we're making the software that adapts to the students' needs? And so Khan Academy has always been there as kind of, for lack of a better word, an asynchronous tutor, an asynchronous teaching assistant. And we just got data out of the pandemic that during the pandemic, and these were large urban school districts, we had 200,000 students in this program. The students whose classrooms, I want to make it clear because some people say there's a confounding variable about who's motivated, who's not, which is absolutely true. But this was the classrooms that decided to use it 30 minutes or 18 hours over the course of a school year. And this was the 2021 to 2022 school year. So in the middle of the pandemic, those classrooms grew, for example, in the 8th grade, they grew 40% faster than pre-pandemic national norms. And this isn't a time where we know most of school districts were actually 15, 20% below pre-pandemic norms. So there's something to be said about just that personalization piece, that ability to go at your kind of zone of proximal development. Completely agree with Susanna that you're more likely, engagement, whether it's an online asynchronous tool or a synchronous tutoring, if you just leave it up to the students, you're going to get some of the dynamics that Susanna mentioned if you just put it after school. So it's got to be part of the school day. We saw that loud and clear on the asynchronous side. And as you mentioned, we saw our usage go up dramatically, both in school and out of school, because of the need for a tool like that asynchronously. And then that's continued. But the other thing that we saw during the pandemic was the need for more human connection and actually to be able to do this exact high dosage tutoring that Susanna was mentioning at scale. So we started a new nonprofit, a sister nonprofit called Schoolhouse.world, which is all about giving free tutoring. And then the obvious question, and it launched literally in the midst of the pandemic. How do you do that? And it was this very utopian idea, is like, what if we could leverage volunteership? And volunteership, some people are like, oh, are they going to be the same quality, et cetera, et cetera. This is anecdotal, what I'm about to share, but most people feel like the quality they're getting is as good or better than they would get with paid tutors, because many of the tutors we're getting actually aren't in the traditional labor pool for tutors. They are college students. They are professionals. They are already a teacher or a professor who wants to give back. Maybe they're teaching at a private college or a private school. They want to give back to other folks, do have service. And we have a very, almost because it is an online volunteer base, I think our certification and our training mechanism has had to be that much more rigorous in order to give people the confidence in what they're getting. And so what, we did not know a year or two ago that tutoring would be the thing that's on, the tip of everyone's tongue. But what we inadvertently, or I guess advertently, intentionally built over that period was a way to slurp in a lot of tutors who have good intention and subject matter competency. And we have a way of certifying that as well. Training them up, scaling them up, have observation, being able to do it safely over a remote environment, and then also having mechanisms to measure the quality of that tutoring. And that's another thing that, if you can't really measure what's going on, it's going to be very hard. Through iteration, we kind of discovered exactly what Susanna is talking about. The two use cases where we've seen the most demand, we do see the on-demand homework help, but I completely agree with what Susanna said. Those are going to be the more motivated kids who show up, and everything I'm saying is available. People can go, and we have windows where there's free on-demand homework help for anybody. But where we're seeing the biggest benefit is the high dosage, multiple sessions a week for multiple weeks with the same cohort. And this week we have 10,000 tutoring sessions for free SAT work. We're partnering with the College Board on that. And this is students who are expected to score between 400 and 500 on the SAT. So students, say in math or in English in either section. So students who could use some help, being tutored by students who are scoring in the 700 to 800 range on English or math. and they've gone through a whole bunch of training. And once again, the net promoter score and the engagement from the students is very, very, very high. So, everything I'm talking about is not for profit. I'm not trying to sell anything, but we are engaged also with school districts who are saying, hey, we want to do a paid program. We just announced a partnership with the state of Virginia. We're working with some HBCUs and the Urban League, where they're going to be paying tutors. Actually, we would love to work with the Cal system as well, or the California Community College system, where they're paying tutors at the HBCUs. These are HBCU students. They're going to go through schoolhouse.world tutoring, and then they're going to be the tutors for kids from historically under-resourced communities in parts of Virginia. So, we're ready to scale, and we'd love to work with everyone here.
So actually, to try it, I read you can from 4 to 7 every day. You can actually check into Schoolhouse World, right? For math help.
Yeah, it's like a 3-minute waiting list. You'd be surprised. It's
Really?
something that most people would expect to pay a lot of money for. It is literally free, and I encourage for people to do both sides. If they know students who need help, they could go. But also, if you think you're capable, become part of the tutoring core. But I would say the boot camps, to Susanna's point, are where it was the real meat. We ran some efficacy studies last year. They really rhymed with everything that Susanna mentioned. And, first of all, people can get SAT help already. And right now it's for students 13 and over, but we're looking at ways to potentially expand that.
Great.
And we cover most of STEM subjects already.
Thanks, Sal. Let's turn now to a case of high impact tutoring that's actually happening, and that's at Green Dot Public Schools with 18 charter middle and public school high schools in California. Alice Prentice is an area superintendent. Thanks for joining us, Alice. Please describe your high impact tutoring in math for 6th and 9th graders. Who provides it? How often? And who are you targeting?
Thanks for having me, John. Yes, I'd love to tell you about our program. So I'll be honest and just give a big thank you to Susanna. We used a lot of her research in designing our program and saw some really great results. So we have high impact tutoring in our 6th and 9th grade math intervention classes. So the research we were looking at showed that the tutoring was more impactful for younger students. So we have that for our youngest students in our middle and high schools. We launched in 8 of our schools last year. We hire instructional aides as high impact tutors, and we train them. They become a part of the classroom. They push in and support the teacher, but they do pull a group of 3 to 4 students out 3 times a week for at least 45 minutes and offer that individualized small group instruction based on the curriculum that we use. So there's heavy collaboration between that classroom teacher and that high impact tutor instructional aide because they're delivering essentially the same content just to a smaller group of students. We select students based on, we're looking for students who are a couple of years behind. We use the iReady assessment, and we're looking at the domains that are most closely aligned to the major work of the grade level. Looking for students who are, we call them on the bubble, a couple of years behind, who can make rapid progress with that individualized attention. And we track their academic progress. We also survey them. So we issue surveys with questions like, my tutor helps improve my math skills. My tutor improves my confidence in math. We had 95% of students last year agree or strongly agree with those statements, which is really, really powerful. And I'll say someone mentioned Saga Education. We did partner with them halfway through the year. My colleague and I were just talking about how we deeply understand teacher effectiveness, but we didn't right away deeply understand tutor effectiveness, which is a little bit different. And so that partnership has been really fruitful for us, and it's continued through this year. I'll say, as we think about scalability, as we think about, expanding, certainly a challenge has been, just the hiring pool, just staffing, in these times, that's been tricky. And I will say it is a big time commitment, right? Because the classroom teacher is daily collaborating with their high impact tutor instructional aide. When we survey them, they tell us they meet every day, they meet for multiple hours a week. And so it certainly is a big time commitment, but we've seen good results and are excited to, expand the program in the future.
Great. We'll come back in a little bit to deal with some training issues. And we'll post Saga Education a link on our website. Saga has been studied and has been shown to be a very effective tutoring, and I think it's based in Chicago. So Lakeisha Young is founder of the Oakland Reach. Lakeisha, for those who know her, is not someone who's willing to sit around and wait for schools to figure things out. She and her neighbors created the Virtual Family Hub during the pandemic, and when remote learning, and it wasn't working for a lot of Black and brown families in Oakland. And you turned and created what's called Literacy Liberators to provide after school and summer instruction. Now you're taking the next step with Oakland Unified. Let's talk about it, Lakeisha, and what you learned from your first step, and what will this partnership with something called Fluent Seeds do to train parents ready to go into your schools?
Awesome. And one quick correction.
Yes.
I like the term neighbors, but we are a 501c3 nonprofit advocacy org, but we are family, and we are the Black and brown mamas. Most of our folks were born and raised in Oakland. Most of all of our team has attended Oakland Unified Schools, and honestly have failed generation after generation. And so these folks are really the ones who are like, not on my watch anymore. Like my grandchild, my child, my niece, my nephew will have options, will have the options to go to college. And as John shared, prior to the pandemic, we were focused on advocacy and policy work, right? And it was all centered around quality education, but it was from a more policy perspective. All of our sort of instruction and leadership development was really focused on parents, right? But when COVID hit, we took that as an opportunity to build the model of excellence that we have been fighting for our kids. And that's what got us to the Family Virtual Hub. And the reason why it's important to start there is because we literally had a prayer, a dream, some passion, some funding, some extra funding, and we were moving fast on the early part of this pandemic. I mean, we started building out the model of the hub at the end of March, which was, March 13th was the last days of school, and we were already building out the sort of concept paper of the hub. And the idea of the hub was to integrate both the academic as well as socioeconomic needs of families, right? So we were taking a multi-generational approach and said, what does it look like to really uplift communities by really focusing on the parent and the child at the same time, making sure they both get what they need. We had just come off of a literacy campaign where we were able to get our district to sign an MOU to move to the science of reading, right? And that was a big deal in all of the leadership development we had done with families, because families, I will tell you, a lot of people say that Black and brown families, low-income families, don't care about their kids. It's a lie all day long, right? They feel oftentimes very powerless to do something substantive around their kids' education. And so we did a lot of leadership development with those families. So it was very natural for us when the hub launched for us to really focus on literacy. And so we built this virtual hub, and it was focused on, we called the literacy component, the Literacy Liberation Center, right? And that's when we really went deep on research-based reading, literacy. We had paraprofessionals, and that's what I'm going to talk about. Paraprofessionals are the heroes in our story, right? And these were the folks who were already literacy tutors in the district. And we taught them, we treated them like teachers, and we invested and had a lot of PD with them. And we really made the main thing, which was the students. And we didn't really know what was going to happen. We're in the middle of the pandemic. Everybody's listening to Fauci every day and Cuomo and trying to figure out, is this like the end of the world? So we're going hard on this. And then 5 weeks later, 60% of our K through 2 students went up 3 grade levels or more, and 30% went up 3 grade levels or more. And we're like, whoa, like, oh, this is what this is supposed to look like. Oh, this is what happens when we are unapologetically focused on the babies, right? When we shift adult behavior. Oh, that's what happens. And the rest is kind of history. So we continued to run the hub for another 18 months. But as you can imagine, our families who were definitely more of the families who did not want to go in person because of COVID, over time, everybody was ready to go back into schools. And that's when we started to sort of evolve our model and pull out that secret sauce. And the secret sauce was that paraprofessional profile, right? And we're like, wait a minute. If the aunties and the folks that look like our kids from the communities can get kids to read, then we can do this at scale. And better yet, like Susanna said, we have to do this at scale. We don't really have an option, right? So all of this stuff about a talent desert and we don't have this, as you know, anytime there's a desert, it's going to be our folks starving the most, right? We're going to be the most thirsty, right? So we have to come up with solutions. And that's how we launched the Liberator model. And the Liberator model is all about upskilling community to become literacy and math tutors. I mean, that really is and you know, I heard everyone speak on the panel, and I think I am super excited about what each of you guys are doing and just the access that you guys are giving community. So I got to make sure everybody in Oakland. Yeah.
Yeah, no, so the next step is to bring
sorry.
the tutors to Oakland schools.
Oh, yeah, sorry. So the tutors are already in Oakland Unified School District. We are recruiting and the second cohort. And just so you know, recruitment really happens in the community. So our team is in front of schools at 7:30 in the morning, talking to parents, making sure parents understand the crisis that we're in right now. And the best way for us to solve this crisis is we're going to need folks to step up and step into these roles. So they become literacy liberators. They are hired with the school district at a 0.8, so they're full-time. So they're able to be participating in that high dosage tutoring during the school day. And these are the mamas and the grandmamas and folks from the school. So we're doing, we're in the middle of that right now. We're launching the next cohort in January. And then our plan is to pilot math this spring.
Very exciting. We'll come back a little bit of how much training does it take to bring members of the community into the schools. But let me now turn to Shani Valencia, who's coordinator of education technology at Irvine Unified. It's a district with 36,000 students. Thanks for joining us, Shani. So you have tried Paper, which is a remote tutor, 24/7, which we've talked about. Why did you turn to 24/7 Paper, and what are the advantages of this? We've heard a little bit about some potential liabilities with that, but what are the advantages of doing this?
Perfect. Well, first, thank you so much, John. Thank you, everyone. It's an absolute honor to be here and represent Irvine Unified and kind of our vision with this on-demand tutoring partnership that we have with Paper. So I'll speak a little bit to kind of our why as to how we ended up selecting Paper. We identified a need actually before COVID. We started with our journey with Paper in 2018. And like any other district, right, any other educational institution, we have a very diverse group of students with diverse needs, and we pride ourselves on providing the absolute best educational experience we can envision. That's our mission. And part of that is accepting that some of our kiddos, you know, despite the intensive interventions, our MTSS models, the structured supports within the school day, some of our kiddos need that extra help and support outside of the school day. And for our families that can provide that and afford that, they're hiring those one-on-one tutors at home. And for our other families that can't support that or can't afford that, the gap widens, the self-efficacy fails or diminishes, and we all know that narrative, right? So we identified that need before COVID and have been looking to how we can support our students that need that extra support and help. So at the time, again, 2018, feels like a long time ago, pre-COVID, we were working with what was Grade Slam, and now Paper, and we partnered with them to provide a virtual on-demand tutoring service. We started with a very small kind of soft rollout pilot group, and we've gradually been rolling it out a little bit more each year. So this year we launched from 4th grade up all the way up to 12th grade. We actually have one of our wonderful 12th grade students, Madison Lee, who we will hear from in just a moment from that student experience experience as well. But really what stood out about Paper is their shared vision, right? They really believe in the same mission of providing students with everything that they need to be successful. And again, as we have continued this journey with them, what has stood out as a partnership is their responsiveness, their ingenuity, and their commitment to its end users. The benefits, John, as you asked, have been pretty outstanding. We've seen, we know that this is going to be a multi-pronged approach from all different angles. And one of that is that kind of opt-in support, homework help support that we discussed a little bit earlier for the students that need that, especially during 2020 when, we had a hybrid format for our high school students. The in-class instruction time was more limited. And so to have that on-demand support was great. It's also been wonderful for our students. Again, I'm really looking forward to hearing Madison's perspective here. Our students are digital natives, right? They're most comfortable in a virtual format, exchanging in that kind of text-based format. So that's been really productive for our students. It's also allowed us to kind of record that transcript and bring the teacher into that tutoring experience because the teacher now has access to that transcript. So the teachers are going through those transcripts, seeing where the pain points are, seeing where the confusion piece is, and now it's incorporated in that instructional loop. So it's really been beneficial for kind of quality control of those tutors versus, when families hire their own tutors privately, we have no idea what support is happening, if the tutor's doing the homework, if the student's doing the homework. So it's really helped to fold in the instruction with the teacher as well, with the student having access to tutors at any point in time. Go ahead, John.
One of the advantages I think of this 24/7 is students get frustrated at home and homework. And this is one thing that's a real plus. I mean, and in terms of getting students on track, is just to answer a question that has them stymied. Is that right?
Yes, I mean, I think so. So if you look at some of our usage numbers, our highest point of usage is 11 a.m. during the school day. So that's proof that it is it's been folded into that instructional time. But also we've got some usage at 2 a.m., right? We've got students that are up and needing that last minute bit of support, and they're able to access that. So that kind of 24/7 on-demand access has been truly helpful. I think the other benefit to Paper as a company, they do full background checks of their tutors. They also train them pretty intensely on the Socratic questioning method. So it's not necessarily here's the answer, what questions do you have? But through questioning, they're able to guide the student to reach the answer. So it's a pretty powerful method. And again, because there's that transparency with the transcript that the teacher can access later, it's really been a very powerful tool in our district.
Now, Madison, are you someone who's calling in at 2 a.m.? Tell us a little bit about your experience with Paper. What's a typical conversation like?
Yes, I am definitely one of the students who are on Paper at 2 a.m. I'm cramming this essay and wanting to get really in-depth feedback on whatever it is I'm doing. If there's a deadline to come up with. And every single time I've gone onto this website and I've used Paper, I've received such in-depth and really heartfelt feedback from all the tutors that have been on this site. I think there was an essay that I was really having trouble with, and I think I submitted it to Paper, no joke, 5 times. And every single time I would just get very great feedback. And I feel like every tutor is very, catered to each student's needs. Sometimes students don't need to have a full hour of tutoring. And honestly, it's a very draining thing to go through, not to mention even the price of having a tutor for a full hour to an hour and a half. So to have this amazing resource for free at any time that I need it, and to be able to have the comfort in the back of my mind that I can fall back on this resource has been a huge help to me. And to be able to see this website and this partnership with Paper and IUSD grow over the years is another great thing. I started using this in freshman year, and now I see it being linked to Canvas, which is our school portal, and to be able to see that directly linked to the class and to have my teachers being advertising this, I think just speaks on the impacts and the sheer reach of this program.
Are you typical, do you think? Are there many of your friends use it? And do you think that many of the students who should be using it are using it?
I think it really depends on the student's needs. Something that IUSD does a really great job of doing is providing multiple I guess, like resources for any student who needs anything. We have a lot of peer tutoring programs, and a lot of my teachers actually assign Khan Academy videos and assignments, and those have been helpful. But I think paper is something that all teachers are starting to advertise more. And I'll share the feedback that I got from my paper tutor, and my friends will share the feedback that they got. And there's this really common consensus that paper is useful and that this has a lot of potential to go far.
Okay. And we've gone through the first round. Do you have questions from the audience?
Time is flying by, and there are lots of questions, and trying to keep track of them all. But one theme that does keep coming up, and this is open to anyone who's interested in answering, is that dichotomy between in-person tutoring in the classroom versus being pulled out of the classroom. How do you make that work? And what's lost when you're pulling a student from the classroom? That's kind of part one. Part two is, what can we learn from tutoring that could make in-classroom instruction better to make the most of it? So those are kind of the two pieces.
I could take a quick stab at it. I mean, there's some of what we've always seen with Khan Academy, that you're going to get higher engagement if you do it inside of the classroom. I think that's, goes with what Susanna's saying. Like, yes, there's going to be some very self-motivated kids who do it outside of the classroom, but if you want all kids, especially the kids who need most, put it inside of the classroom. Tutoring, I think, is the same thing. If the students are able, that's the benefit for like a remote platform, is that they can sit in that same classroom physically while still, have some headphones on and engage potentially with the live tutor. I think, the pedagogy that we should always be trying to do with tutoring or not, Khan Academy or not, is, minimize passive lectures, maximize the amount of time that students are actually actively problem solving, ideally actively problem solving in their zone of proximal development at their learning edge. And every classroom has potentially 29 tutors for every student in that classroom, which is their peers. And there's a lot of good evidence around peer tutoring, especially if it's structured well. We've seen the best classes, using Khan Academy. Students are able to use Khan Academy, learn at their own pace, master concepts, zone of proximal development. Teachers able to do some breakouts, active problem solving, using Socratic method, acting like a good small group tutor, and even better, having those kids go into groups, maybe with a group leader, try to problem solve with each other, and then come back. And so it's just all active problem solving versus passive finger on your lips lecture.
Susanna, that must be the distinction between, the homework helper and also a tutor. I mean, that's the part of the training, right? Talk about that, if you will.
Yeah, so I'm not quite sure what your question is, but I'll try to hit on it anyway. But one of the good things that we've seen in the research about tutoring is lots and lots of people can be really great tutors, that it doesn't have to be a fully certified teacher in order to do that. And it is true that training is part of it. I think like initial training is important. Oversight is even more important. But on top of that, there's a use for technology. I actually think what Lakeisha was saying about particularly young kids, even though we want tutoring 3 or more times a week and we want it to be intensive, they only have a concentration span for, 5 or 10 minutes. So if you had a tutor in the classroom that really knew each child and could go in and help them 5 minutes a day, we've just studied a program like that with huge effects. I don't see why we don't do that across the country. And if those tutors are supported by a technology that tells them what each student needs, what is their learning, that uses formative assessments to get at that, and then uses, somewhat of a scripted curriculum to help them figure out what it is that could help the students in the next step, then they don't have to be such skilled teachers, but they could be skilled at engaging students, at having knowledge of their shared experiences, of their communities. I think that is just as important in some of this tutoring. And so all this to say is that training is important, but lots of people can do it, particularly if they're well supported by technology that gives them the information that they need to really target each student's needs.
Lakeisha, you're shaking your head in agreement. Tell us what it is.
A lot of what Susanna's saying makes me shake my head in agreement, and that is not a norm for me.
Yeah, I mean, you're bringing members of the community who maybe have not thought of themselves as teachers in schools to do that?
No, they have not. They are just passionate. And in terms of like what the training component for us, and you asked about Fluent Seeds, obviously we are the leadership development. We're not the pedagogical experts. So we partnered with Fluent Seeds, who brings that pedagogical component. What's really key about the demographic of folks that we support, because to your point, John, they're not, I mean, literally, when I talk about we're talking to a mom at 7:30 in the morning, and then she's interviewing for our fellowship 2 weeks later, that's just straight passion, right? About like, I want to be a part of it. And so the fellowship component sort of braids both the leadership development and some pedagogical pieces to it. And then they start to get placed into schools. And while they're placed into schools, I think like Susanna said, it's about the oversight. So we continue to do, they're in what they call a residency. And during the residency, they will be in schools for 30 hours a week, but they will have weekly professional development to keep building that pedagogical and leadership skill set. And then obviously the oversight is the site visits, being able to kind of see how they're adapting and connecting into their classroom. So those sort of, that kind of infrastructure gives the type of supports that allows this pathway to be accessible to a lot more folks than you can imagine.
Was that difficult to persuade Oakland Unified to accept this? I mean, usually it's the district's got to control the training and it's got to be in charge. And this
well,
is
you know what?
Yeah.
Here's two things I'll say. One is no, because the district, this, we have a read by third grade goal to have 100 tutors for 5,600 K through 2 students, right? In our lowest performing schools. This took a team effort. So we have principals on the ground who were also recruiting their parents in the schools to become tutors, right? So this is something that OUSD has definitely embraced in a significant way. And I'll just add, as you think about California as a whole in the country, how many vacancies are we going to have before we start to be open to a whole lot of other things? Like the vacancies are deepening, which I don't think anyone can really afford to not be innovative, which is what this panel is supposed to be all about, this conversation, and embrace new ways. And we can't keep using the same pipelines of folks, because the last part that I want to add that I think is more on what some folks would call on the social justice level, right? And on the deep level is that parents as liberators, literacy liberators, is an asset building pathway for community. Superintendents leave, principals leave, teachers leave, community stay. And because there's so much flux in our large urban districts, you can imagine the impact it has on communities, right? And our communities are the ones that are most impacted. So building that asset in community means that no matter what chaos happens, they are still able to teach their own and teach other folks' kids. And I think from just a heart, from a heart level, that's what makes me jump for joy, is that's power.
So thank you, Lakeisha. Here's a question from a viewer. What are the proven strategies to get students, especially high school students, to attend tutoring? And Shani, I'll turn to you because my understanding is that paper charges you per student, per capita, and it's up to you to get students to call in. Am I right? And how do you do that?
So we pay per student. I will say that is another reason why Paper's been such a great partnership to work with. From the very initial rollout, they had a rollout plan with us. They have single-handedly in person gone to every single one of our high schools. They have done a whole pep rally. They've worked with individual teachers. Our CSM is very much invested in the success of this program in our district. So the connections they have built with every single site that has really been significant. In addition to their training and onboarding that they've run through their program, we also do a lot of in-house work. So we have done a lot of kind of training options for our teachers to see how this could work within their instruction. So the hope is that our teachers are championing this access and this tool. As Madison referred to a little bit earlier, we've also incorporated it in some of our digital platforms like Canvas. Canvas is our LMS system that we use here in Irvine Unified. And we've added Paper as a part of access in every single Canvas course. So as students go into their Canvas course, they see that paper option on the left-hand side and they can navigate directly to it from there. So we've tried to hit it from all angles to make sure students know that they can opt into it from home. We've tried to get our teachers to be championing this resource within their class or giving it to students as a potential resource to access at home. And we've infused it in every single online platform that we can to really drum up the excitement and the support and just the overall awareness that this amazing tool exists for our students 24/7. So that's been impactful. We have seen over the years a steady increase in usage taking shape. And most excitingly, as Madison mentioned, we are seeing more teachers really embracing the power of using this tool, both in the classroom and recommending it for their students outside of school. So it's, all the avenues and angles that we can take, and we are seeing the results of that through that steady increase in usage year after year.
We've touched on this subject already a little bit, but how important is it to have a strong connection between students, teachers, aides, and tutors? And I guess this is particularly when tutoring occurs outside of school, as it often does at a Boys and Girls Club or after school. So any thoughts on that? Susanna, did it come up in your studies when you studied? Is it more effective to have this connection, and those who don't are really missing a key component?
Yeah, so I think it's, somewhat context specific on this one. Some of the really strong programs do have strong connections between the teacher and the tutor. The benefit is that the students see the tutor as part of their regular school day. The tutor gets to see the students and learn from the teacher about the students. That said, some teachers just can't add more to what they're doing, and there are programs that are successful as long as they're using high quality materials and they're meeting with students regularly, that are successful. So I don't think it's necessary in all situations, but it can be beneficial. I just wanted to put one plug in, which is that, the best way to get students to come is to have it be part of their schedule. And that's really the way that we've seen it. We just did a randomized experiment to try to use an opt-in and see whom we could get to take it up. And we did get some good effects when we reached out to both parents and students together, much better than when we reached out to one of them. And so I do think teachers are probably the best way, we've been hearing, but nothing is going to be nearly as good for the disengaged students than to actually have it as part of what their school day is.
John, can I just add that I think that this is a huge aspiration for the Liberator model. I don't know if you read the RAND report, and just sort of 40% of Black teachers were saying that they were not going back to the classroom. Folks were feeling burnt out, but a majority of folks said that if they need more human capital, they need more folks. So we really see the Liberator being a partner in classrooms with teachers, and not just in this sort of stereotypical, you can be a family liaison connecting with a parent, but to have the skill set to be able to have those structured conversations on students' literacy progress. It's sort of an amazing bridge builder to have a mama who came from a family where literacy has not been a strong suit, and now they're a literacy liberator, sitting down and talking to another parent whose student or child may be struggling. So that deep connection, but with that content, that pedagogical context, I think both helps community and helps families, but it also helps the teacher. Just think about how much more a teacher can do if the Liberator was taking on so much of this, so really excited to see what this can do over time. I will add one thing. There's a tension. The tension is, as we know, we do not do a great job teaching our teachers how to teach reading. Okay. So Liberators will have extensive research-based PD, right? When it comes to teaching reading. So over time, it will be interesting to see how these sort of pathways of developing educational leaders align or have tensions. Me, I got to tell like it is. I just want to say that.
Two other themes I just wanted to jump in from the audience and open it up to the group about how to address English learners and tutoring. And also those students at the much earlier grades, maybe even in the early elementary grades, and what specifically should schools and school districts be thinking about with those students?
Well, we just did this study in Florida and found huge effects of a program similar in many ways to Lakeisha's. We found them equally, if not more, for English learners than for non-English learners. But it's got these same elements of a consistent, in this case, person in the classroom, like a paraprofessional, working with each student. And I mean, just one way of thinking about how this is different than what you have is that many places, many classrooms have both a teacher and an assistant teacher in them, but often they just split the class. So they have about the same number, 10 each, 15 each, something like that. But if instead one was small and one got to give this individualized attention that used the science of reading, for example, to really support the students, that would be using almost the same resources and yet building on this knowledge that we have about what students need in order to really learn reading.
Any other questions you want to, the audience has asked we should focus on now, Anne?
Well, there was a question about research, and do we have a sense? Is there any data that shows how many students are accessing tutoring, and how much tutoring are they accessing? Is there, any way to even gauge that? With all this windfall, right? There's so much money right now, infused into budgets, and so much has been talked about infusing it for bolstering tutoring. Do you know of any?
We really want that number. I don't have it. So I wish I did. I know it's so much more this year than it was last year. So there's been this huge increase across the country in the take up of it. And I think there'll be even more next year. So we're on the right trajectory. I can tell you a little more about opting in. I think in general, about 20% of students tend to take up opt-in tutoring. And I've heard that both from we've seen that in our own research, and we've heard that from others. But in terms of this intensive tutoring, more and more students are getting it. And I think maybe close to 5. Well, I don't want to choose it. I don't want to say a number. Some people are trying to collect that. I don't have it. I wish I did.
Sal, you got any sense of how popular this is?
I mean, those numbers fit with what we've observed anecdotally, which is if you just, and look, there's state superintendents who have issued like, hey, we're going to give free tutoring to everyone in the state. And if you talk to them, like, they're not even getting hundreds of students show up. And this is like at the state level. So, that gives you an indication. If you just put something out there and just hope people will come, for the most part, they won't, especially not the students who need it most. And so I think the more that you can make it part of the system and really measure it, because it's very easy to hire a firm and say, hey, everyone gets free tutoring now, and but then no one really shows up. That's, I think, unfortunately, kind of the norm in a lot of places. So make sure that the engagement's there. There's some form of measurement, and you're likely to have a better outcome.
So you mentioned the state. Let's talk about California. It started something called the California Core, and it is it's provided. It was a college core, I should say, and it's been promoted by. It was really Governor Newsom's been behind it. It's kind of modeled on the Peace Corps, and you can college students can earn $10,000 towards their tuition or paying off their debt if they provide 450 hours of involvement in it. And there's several ways that they can do it. One is through environmental work. Another one is through, say, working at food distribution center. But then a half of them are put aside for tutors or mentors. And we now have this first year, and we'll put up the link to my story, which I talked about it, 1,500 tutors. And so the question is, it can be expanded if the governor hears that it's working well and people demand it. California could play a bigger role in tutoring. And maybe the question is, how does it do it? How does it guide it? Does it set priorities? Maybe middle school math or early literacy, as Lakeisha's involved in. And then how should it work? And I think it's looking for input on that. And it gets to a couple questions that viewers have asked, which is, how do we get regular tutoring at scale for the state? Any thoughts on that?
I mean, I think it's a terrific program, and California is not the only state that's trying to do something similar. I think it has benefits for the college students as well as for the students that they tutor, because they get a chance to, gain some skills. They get a chance to understand whether they want to be teachers. It might be a good pipeline source. At the same time, what I really like about it for tutoring is it's a regenerating source of tutors. And so you really could have this source of college students working with K-12 students and be there for that intensive time that they need in a way that kind of benefits everybody and that can go on for a really long period of time. And I think it's those kinds of structures that we really need to build in, so that we don't have to search for tutors again and again and again, but that either we have kind of a paraprofessional workforce, or we have this kind of stream of college students or other kinds of volunteers, but ones that are supported, kind of the more paid volunteers kind of way of doing it, that are supported by programs like this.
Are there states?
I could.
Oh, go ahead, Sal.
Oh no, a couple of quick things is, one, I'm going to try to contact the powers that be here, because obviously we think we can help them organize these tutors and make sure we're documenting what they're doing and the efficacy, et cetera. I think there's another really interesting, absolutely, you can get volunteers, maybe on the back end, pay them $15 an hour, reduce tuition. I think that's really interesting. We've piloted that with a few school districts. I think the other thing is, for us, for this flywheel to be successful post ESSER funds, we got to figure out a way that it can work post ESSER funds. And well, I'm really interested by non-monetary incentives for a lot of students. I'm actually hoping that today, to get into college, a good ACT, SAT score, good grades, AP, whatever. What if being a good tutor, a highly reputed tutor, you clearly know the subject domain at that point, if you're a highly reputed tutor, and if we can validate that, and then you can communicate, you can empathize, that should be the way to get access to college or internships or maybe even paid tutoring opportunities. So we're looking at that. For example, the schoolhouse.world tutor profile is now being used by UChicago, MIT, Georgia Tech, Case Western. We're talking to 4 or 5 other universities for college admissions, because they want to see who actually can be a tutor. And you can imagine that creates a huge incentive for these kids to volunteer and volunteer at high quality.
Yeah, I'm really intrigued by your certification process. I mean, you're actually all the tutors, you just can't be a tutor on Schoolhouse World. You have to go through a process, and who evaluates? Is it fellow peer tutors who have gone through it, say, yes, you're qualified to, say, teach Algebra 1, and then we're keeping track of the number of people who come back to you as a measure of whether or not it's working?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a very transparent process. I encourage people to go to schoolhouse.world and check it out, or even try to become a tutor yourself. It is both accessible but highly rigorous. I'd argue it's more rigorous than almost any other tutor vetting process, because you first have to show your subject matter competency. You do that. There's a process where you record your face and screen while you explain that you're reasoning out loud while you take a Khan Academy unit test or course challenge. That then gets peer reviewed. Then, if that's all looking good, then you get significant tutor observations. The sessions are recorded for safety and quality purposes. You get coaching based on that. You get kind of sorted into, okay, you're ready for this, or you need a lot more training. And then after that, you get, honestly, as much feedback as most people can handle, which is like every session, every student rates every tutor along a series of rubrics. We're also getting master tutors to look at the transcripts of the sessions and the recordings of the sessions to give extra feedback on top of that. So it's honestly, I've tutored and taught in many different contexts. It's more feedback and more training than any of these contexts I've ever been in.
Any other panelists have any recommendations to the state? I'm sure someone from the state is listening. It's a great opportunity to make a recommendation, or based on your own experience.
I definitely have a recommendation. my recommendation is we do need to actually revisit credentialing. I think as we're thinking about the Liberator model, a lot of people have asked us, like, do you see these folks going into traditional teacher roles? We've talked about this before, John. And what we're saying is we want to support their pathways in any way, but we want to actually make sure they have a pathway to just stay in this sort of role. So whether it's a micro credential or an alt credential, an alternative credential, we want to push for that, because the part I'll say here is that many of our tutors, they are mamas raising children and taking care of families. They can't go back and get their BA. If they want to go back and get their bachelor's degree, they can, but we want to make this sort of grow and sustainable and make it really reputable. I think it's a lot to what Sal is saying, just in a different way. We want this to feel like this is a special role and it has its pathway. But so we've got to just disrupt this sort of traditional credentialing thing that makes it really hard for us to bring talent and retain talent in this state.
Okay. Any other thoughts? Shani, Alice?
One thing I would say is that we had 3 former students work as high impact tutors last year. It's their first job in an education setting, and they experienced great results. Students grew a lot with their tutoring. 2 of those tutors from last year are long-term subs for us this year. We're hopeful we can support them in a path to becoming teachers. We have one of our former tutors is now a parent coordinator. So I think pathways into tutoring or pathways into the education profession. And it's just been really great to see our former students sort of joining our community of staff. And I think it can be a pathway.
Fantastic. Shani, you got any last thoughts?
Last thoughts. I think just for me, in terms of rolling this out to a statewide program, especially from the conversation here today, is there's not going to be one silver bullet, right? There's going to be a multi-faceted approach that's going to work very differently for different dynamics, different sets of kiddos. And I think any state program will have to be very dynamic to meet the very different needs that exist, both within the classroom day, but also after school help as well.
Thank you. Madison, you get the final word, as it should be a student using paper. Go ahead and talk about anything that you would like to see done, tutoring statewide or whatever else is on your mind.
Well, I just want to say that it's been amazing to listen to all these wonderful and amazing panelists. It's very exciting to see that we have such amazing and passionate professionals who are devoting their everyday work to really creating more access and creating more opportunities for students who are maybe high achieving and maybe students who don't have the access to be high achieving.
Well said. I can't think of anything better. Anne, turn it over to you.
That's a great note to end on. I want to thank all of our panelists today. It's been a wonderful conversation, and it really did fly by as we expected. And for those of you who've been listening in, thank you for the wonderful questions. For those behind the scenes, thank you for helping to answer those questions. And a reminder, we did record today's roundtable, so we will be sharing that in our newsletter later this week, and come back to edsource.org anytime. Thank you all.